This week on Motor Week, we look at a monster from Mitsubishi in the shape of the L200 Twin Cab. Richard Hammond's got a touch of the Willis as he looks at how the Jeep's changed over the years. And we've got our very first drive of the awesome new MG ZS.
The Mitsubishi L200 Double Cab is a pretty impressive looking car, but who's going to buy it? I reckon that it's far too smart and sophisticated for a builder, and at around £19,000 I think it's a little bit too expensive too, and I can't imagine the ladies who lunch swapping their shiny Shoguns for one of these. So who's going to buy it? Well, Mitsubishi say that it's really popular with the active sporty type, and they use this big load bay at the back for all their lifestyle accessories. Sounds very energetic to me. The L200 is Mitsubishi's take on the rapidly expanding sports utility vehicle market. It comes in a range of body styles, including two-door single cab and this, the impressively titled Triton 3-litre V6 petrol-engined double cab. The L200 on the road drives like any other off-roader. It pitches and it lurches into the corners, and you ain't going to get anywhere very fast in it. The 3-litre V6 engine sounds pretty impressive, but it's got this great massive body weight to haul around, which kind of lets it down. Mitsubishi quote that it's got 178 brake horsepower at 5,000 RPM, and it pulls 188 pound per foot of torque at 4,500 RPM. All very scientific, but what does it mean to the likes of you and me? It means that off-road is going to give you quite a good performance. On-road, it's not very rapid. Now, as a load carrier, the Mitsubishi is very good. They quote the maximum load as over £1,000, and the towing capacity is over £6,000. But if you haven't got the optional load bay cover, ladies, when it rains, your shopping's going to get awfully wet. Now, for £19,000, the build quality of this interior, I'm afraid, really isn't up to scratch. I mean, look at the upholstery. And the dashboard is really quite plasticky and cheap, and it is so basic. We've got this tacky little cassette player. We haven't even got any air conditioning, but the cab will sit 5 adults comfortably, and best of all, we've got one of these. The L200 has a host of extras available, including a style pack, which hints at what Mitsubishi expect this car to be used for. This includes stainless steel sidebars, rear lamp guards and something called a sports bar. Now, I thought that was what ex-footballers owned in trendy inner city areas. The L200 double cab will certainly get you noticed in a traffic jam, and if you've got a lot of kit to carry around, this is definitely the car for you. But why not buy a more practical Freelander or one of those new wave lifestyle-y estates? So maybe it has got quite a small niche market, but so what? I think it's different, I think it's funky, I think it's fun, and when you're sitting inside that cab, you feel like you're king or queen of the road.
It's always interesting to compare an old model with a new one, see what changes are being made from one year to the next. But this time we thought we'd take it to extreme. 50 years between the two cars, an original World War II Willis Jeep and today's Jeep Wrangler 4-litre L Sport.
Well, what can you say about the car's styling? Despite being separated by over 50 years, the distinctive classic lines of the Willis are clearly still echoed in the new Jeep. Okay, so the new Jeep is bigger, but they both share the same big muscle grille, oval headlamps and exposed hinges that give both that all-American rugged appeal. The Willis, however, does have some extras you won't find on today's Jeep, namely a shovel and an axe, just in case things become too tough for even the Willis.
You can still see a family resemblance, but it'll be interesting to find out if they've got anything else in common at all. Well, it might be quite rugged and basic by modern standards. I mean, the thing's got manual wind-up windows, but compared to something 50 years ago, it's pretty sophisticated. We've got a 4-litre engine, of course, so no shortage of power to keep up with modern-day traffic. We've got a reasonably slick, though perhaps rather clunkier than desirable, gearbox. We've got a stereo, which of course you stand a chance of hearing over a more modern engine than in the old Willis. And we've even got a heater, though nothing as crazy as air conditioning. Ironic, isn't it, really, that the vehicle that today claims its descendancy directly from the original Jeep from the war should have grown into what many see as, well, a bit of a girl's car. It is a bit soppy. It's an image thing, let's be honest. Most of us aren't going to tax it. That said, the Wrangler is reckoned to be extremely competent off-road, and I can believe that. It's got all the right bits and pieces. A rugged chassis, a huge amount of articulation in the axles, plenty of power, and of course a reasonably sophisticated and solid four-wheel drive system. If you were to venture beyond the city confines, you'd be fine in this. Not that you're going to, are you? But enough of this mincing around, talking around town. What's the point when we've got the real deal waiting for us over there? All I've got to do is get there, across open ground, with no cover. God, this takes me back to Nam. Well, you can't be too careful, can you? Blimey! Even starting this thing is a butch procedure. Switch, choke, button, pedal. Geronimo, now which way is that bridge? What's that noise? That World War II Jeep. Here we come to save the day. This is hilarious. It's also got about 1,000 turns from turn to turn on the wheel to get the thing to change direction. That's why you see them on the films when they're trying to steer it, because you've got to. We've got 3 gears, low, intermediate and high. Through the transfer case, we've then got a low and high ratio gearbox. Supposedly, in high ratio, you can't go any faster than 65 miles an hour. But as the speedo tops out at 60, I've no idea if I am. It's just like somebody's chucked a load of old bike frames and bedsteads into a skip and welded a car out of it. Of course, safety isn't what it is now. You do get, well, you get this, a strap. No idea. They may share a similar name, but let's be honest, they're more than 1 million miles apart. And I don't just mean the gulf of 50 years between the two cars. Their design brief couldn't be much more different. On the one hand, the maximum mobility on the field of battle, and on the other, well, maximum exposure on the pose down the high street. And so I salute my old friend, the humble Jeep. You may carry on, Lieutenant.
Unless you've been on Mars for the last couple of years, you'll be aware that it's been an up and down time for Rover. Being bought out by BMW, then dropped like a stone, they were left struggling for survival and the future looked grim. Then at the Geneva Motor Show, we saw the cars that were the light at the end of the tunnel. Hail the return of Z-Cars. There are 3 new MG models, the ZR, ZS and ZT, and although they share the same body shells of the Rover models, there is not much else to tempt Grandad out of his smoking chair. No, these new MGs are firmly aimed at the boy or girl racer in you. I'm driving the middle of the range ZS. Middle of the range, but definitely not middle of the road. The shell is based on the Rover 400, but there have been extensive changes to the suspension, the chassis, and the V6 has been nicked from the Freelander. Oh, and in case you didn't notice, there's been a bit of an image makeover with the body kit. From any angle, the MG looks like a balls-out sports saloon. Front splitter, side skirts, 17-inch alloys, big bore exhaust with chrome heat shield, and the boy racer's calling card, a huge rear spoiler. MG have certainly not pulled any punches with their new image. Well, it certainly looks hard, but does it drive hard? Well, first impressions, definitely. First of all, for the noisy bit, the engine. What's unusual about a car this size is that it's got a V6, which means bags of torque. You can have the 1.8K series, but for out-and-out sports performance, I'd go for the 2.5 litre, 180 brake horsepower unit. 0 to 60 time is a rapid 7.3 seconds, and it'll take you on to just under 140 miles an hour, with a pretty good fuel consumption of a combined 30 miles to the gallon. Now, another essential ingredient to a sports car is a cracking gearbox, and again the ZS supplies. It's tight, it's notchy, and although the clutch might be a bit heavy, it's still a great gearbox to use. I've got to say, the ride is brilliant. The car feels solid, poised and balanced on the road, and for a little over £16,000, I think that's pretty impressive. If I'm being really picky, I think that the steering is slightly light, but saying that, you do still get a lot of feedback through the steering wheel. Now, you'll have guessed by now that I'm really impressed with this car, but there are a few things that I think they could improve on. Firstly, the body styling. Now, whilst it looks striking, it also looks like an Essex boy has given his Rover 400 a good max powering in his garage. It looks a bit bolted on. And as for this rear spoiler, it might be good for the aerodynamics, but it's also good for blocking your rear view, especially on the motorways. Watch out for those policemen sneaking up behind you. And the other area that could be improved is the interior. And although the door trims and the gear lever are stylish, the rest of the car is a far cry from the boy racer exterior. It's a little bit old Rover. MG will argue that it's only £16,000, but Seat can do a great interior job on just a 14 grand Leon. I've yet to drive the other two MG saloons, but I have a feeling they're going to be really impressive, and they're coming up on Motor Week very soon. You know, MG have taken the knocks on the chin and they've gone forwards to produce a fantastic car in the ZS, whether you're a fan of the looks or not. Whilst the long-term future still isn't secure for MG Rover, with them aiming their cars at younger, sportier drivers, and with MG's racing heritage, they're in with a fighting chance. And let's hope they succeed, because I don't think anyone in the world would want to lose the MG Octagon forever.
Still to come on Motor Week, we've our behind-the-scenes look at the British Grand Prix, and Ian Royle's got a used car tip for us in the shape of the Honda CRX.
It It's always been a bit of a surprise to me that Honda have not sold millions and millions and millions of cars in this country, because quite frankly, they ought to do. Their cars are brilliantly built, solid, reliable, hold their value well, and are capable of going on and on and on. Yet Honda's sales figures in this country are, well, okay-ish. And this week on Motor Week, we look at, well, the NSX apart, the rarest Honda on our roads, the CRX. So what does a CRX look like? Well, this. It's basically a two-door coupe version of the popular Civic. So it's small, lightweight and nimble, and quite a rare sight. Existing owners don't like parting with their CRXs. This is a 1992 J-Reg CRX, and it's done about 35,000 miles. When this car was new, it cost about £15,000, so not exactly a cheap motor. And it's not particularly cheap now either. £5,500 you'd have to pay for this 8-year-old example. There are 3 different CRXs to look out for. There's the fixed head coupe, there's this, which is the Targa roof, and there's also a version with an electric Targa roof. Now, we recommend you don't go for the electric Targa roof version simply because it took about 20 different electric motors to make the roof work, and inevitably they used to go wrong from time to time, and that's just going to cost you money. Specification on the CRX is pretty good. It includes power steering, air conditioning, and electric windows and mirrors. It's strictly a 2-seater though, with not much room in the car or the boot. Early CRXs built before 1992 were 2+2s, but even then hardly roomy. On later cars you had the choice of 2 1.6 engines with either 125 brake horsepower or the VTEC with nearly 160 brake horsepower. By the way, don't confuse the CRX with the Civic coupes, because they're not only vastly different in looks but also in the way that they drive. I suppose what Honda were trying to do with this CRX is emulate Toyota and their MR2. However, to be perfectly honest, it didn't quite pay off for them. You do sit very low in this car though, it's very grippy and it almost feels a bit like driving a go-kart, and it's quick. The 1.6 VTEC engine will get you to 60 in 8 seconds and onto a top speed of 132 miles an hour. The less powerful 1.6 engine is only slightly slower in the sprint, taking 9.2 seconds and a maximum of 119 miles per hour. Prices at the moment are stable, and cars are generally to be found in private sales rather than on main dealer forecourts. A 1993 K-Reg VTEC with 75,000 miles still sets you back £4,500. A 95 N-Reg Targa Auto with 55,000 miles on the clock looks costly at £7,300. So the Honda CRX, whilst hardly being drop-dead gorgeous, is a solid investment. Depreciation is low, it's nippy, it's easy to drive, and it's quite a rare sight on our roads, and that's why we like them. And that's this week's used car tip, the Honda CRX.
Finally on Motor Week, Formula One news, and for David Coulthard, last weekend's British Grand Prix was not a happy experience after getting himself beached in the gravel after just 4 laps. But for teammate Mika Häkkinen, his first ever win of the British Grand Prix was a great victory, especially as he led the race from lap 5 onwards. For the Arrows at Silverstone, they had quite a good result after Jos Verstappen started in 17th place and made it up to 9th after 4 laps. He eventually took 10th. Enrique Bernoldi went from grid position 20 to 14th after 2 laps and finished in 14th. Motor Week asked Jos what he thought about the Silverstone track.
Yeah, it's a very challenging track, especially the first couple of corners. You have Cops, you have Beckett's. Beckett's were really quick corners. Then we have Stowe, you have Club. I mean, it's all very famous corners, and they're still a hard circuit physically and a very difficult circuit as well. To go really quick, you really have the car sorted out. and it also depends from the weather. But it's a nice circuit to drive on, absolutely.
Then we met up with recent signing Enrique Bernoldi. What was his thoughts on Silverstone?
Yeah, circuit is very good, it's very famous, and almost all the Formula 1 teams are based in England, and this is the British Grand Prix. So, like in our days, most of the circuits are like this. You still have some circuits where the driver can make a little bit more difference, which I would say that like Monaco or Spa-Francorchamps. But more or less nowadays, everywhere you go, the car has to be there, because otherwise you have no chance.
Well, that's it for this week, but on next week's Motor Week, Chris Goffey gets behind the wheel of a V8-powered Porsche-beating MGB. Plus, we've our regular look from behind the scenes at F1.